Good evening. The Royal Bank of Scotland has confirmed it is to pay its chief executive, Stephen Hester, a controversial bonus of just under £1 million in shares. The board of RBS, which is owned by 80% is owned by the state, agreed the payout yesterday amid growing political pressure to curb large bonuses for its executives.
In a statement issued tonight, the bank said the decision reflected tangible achievements in the business. There's already been huge criticism of the move, with Brendan Barber, General Secretary of the TUC, describing the payment as a huge mistake. A short while ago, I spoke to our business editor, Robert Peston, who's at the World Economic Forum in Davos in Switzerland, and he told me that the bonus amounted to less than half of what Stephen Hester was paid in 2010.
The slashing of his bonus follows enormous pressure from the Prime Minister and the Treasury on Royal Bank of Scotland, which of course is 81% owned by taxpayers, for there to be a very significant reduction in the bonus. Even so, this bonus will prove hugely controversial. We've already heard from trade unions today that they think it's outrageous that he's receiving a bonus at all, and after a year in which thousands and thousands of jobs have been shed by Royal Bank of Scotland. Some investors may think it's a bit odd because Royal Bank of Scotland's shares have fallen very sharply in the past year. But the chairman of Royal Bank of Scotland, the board of Royal Bank of Scotland, were adamant that he deserved a bonus because, in their view, he has very significantly reduced the risks that Royal Bank of Scotland takes, shrunk its balance sheet, shrunk the amount that it lends and borrows. So from their point of view, he's done a pretty good job. This is significantly less than the maximum bonus he could have received, is what they will argue. That said, this is 81% controlled by taxpayers, as I say, and many people will therefore see him as, in a sense, a public servant. And in the context of public servants in the civil service, £900,000 is an awful lot of money. And remember, this is a man whose salary is something like £1 million a year anyway.
And the fact that it is owned in such a large proportion by the taxpayer, how much power do ministers actually have to try to curb those bonuses? You mentioned, obviously, David Cameron and put that moral pressure.
Well, they're in a very paradoxical position. On the one hand, you would assume that since we own the majority of the shares in Royal Bank of Scotland, the government could simply tell Royal Bank of Scotland what it has to do. However, the board of this company sees itself as independent. It's a PLC, and they have what's known as fiduciary duties to make decisions, such as decisions on pay, that they believe to be in the interest of their business. And they would have taken the view, if the government had simply said, right, you must do exactly what we say, you must pay no bonus at all, they would have taken the view that their authority had been undermined. And quite frankly, there was a very serious risk that they would all have resigned in those circumstances. And I have to say, I don't think this is a government which wanted to take the risk of the entire board of an enormous organisation walking out.
Robert Peston, well, the Shadow Treasury Minister Chris Leslie said the size of the bonus would astonish the public.
To millions of people who are struggling to make ends meet, I think this is going to be quite an astounding decision. And remember, it's a decision of the government because RBS is 82% owned by the Treasury, by Her Majesty's government. They have representation on the board, as well as making decisions afresh each year in that remuneration committee about what the bonuses should be. So this is the Prime Minister and the Chancellor's decision. And I just don't know what it would take for a bonus not to be paid in these circumstances. Stephen Hester, and he's got important things to do, but he gets a salary of £1.2 million already. So this is another further £1 million on top of that. And it just seems so astonishingly out of touch that I think people will be very surprised indeed.
You say that it's the government obviously has a big interest, a big stake in this. RBS tonight saying that actually the bonus that he has been paid is based on the terms of his contract and pay that were agreed when he was actually appointed in 2008 to replace Sir Fred Goodwin, and those were terms obviously that were agreed by the Labour government.
Well, no, I mean, and that's what David Cameron and Nick Clegg have been saying for some time. But we've now got hold of a copy of that contract. We can see that the bonus element, that's what we're talking about today, is decided afresh each year by the Remuneration Committee. And
sorry, I mean, based on whether certain targets have been met. Is
well, the terms of those targets targets are reconsidered by the Remuneration Committee each year. In fact, it would be quite interesting to know what performance targets they've used in this particular round, because the share price at RBS has fallen by something like 35% in the last year. In terms of some of their big tasks, lending to businesses, helping the economy, well, that's going the opposite direction. I mean, there have been steps forward at RBS, and I don't want to diminish the important work that Stephen Hester is doing in terms of managing the balance sheet, but my point is that he gets £1.2 million already. That's his job, that's his salary. Think of everybody else who gets a salary. Why would you be still entitled to, what, 80% of that as a bonus on top as well? I think it's excessive. Most people in their right minds will think that too. I just don't understand why the Prime Minister has made this decision.
The body that represents taxpayers' interests, UKFI, has said that it's their view that the announcement today recognises the tangible achievement in the business and protects the interests of shareholders, including, of course, the UK taxpayer. In that he's doing the sort of job to protect taxpayers' interests and the investment in the company. I mean, presumably that's a view that the Labour government agreed with when this contract was signed, in that it was paying someone to do the job well, competitive rates.
Except the thing is, from the taxpayer's perspective, the value of the company has shrunk quite dramatically in the past year. The share price has fallen by 35%. So as far as the taxpayer value is concerned, that's gone in the opposite direction, and yet still a bonus of £1 million. I ask again, really, what would it take for no bonus or a smaller bonus to actually be paid? And there are lots of people up and down the country doing very, very hard work day in, day out. They don't get any bonus at all, especially in the public sector where pay is frozen. But this is a state-owned bank. It had to be rescued by the taxpayer. This is the sort of behaviour that the Prime Minister promised we wouldn't see, but all of those promises are clearly worthless.
Do you think that the government's views were taken into account, though? David Cameron did say that £1 million or above would have been unacceptable.
And, of course, he said that a week or two ago. So, obviously, there was discussion. He'd sanctioned it. We now know, as I say, this was a decision afresh each year. Clearly, this figure isn't something calculated very carefully. It was deliberately chosen, so it would be just that shade under £1 million for political reasons. So this is a highly political decision by the Prime Minister, by the Chancellor, and yet so out of touch. And it's about time we had a repeat of that bank bonus tax that we had back in 2009 to take some of these excessive bonuses and use the money to help get young people's jobs going across the country. We need that sort of approach when it comes to this excessive bonus policy.
Chris, Leslie speaking to Joanna.
Now, management at a primary school where a teacher was found guilty